Everybody, this is Perch. What if a hobby that you enjoy, something you love, just changes? Meaning, different people. It's made for a different audience. It's got different people enjoying it. You're the outlier. Is that what's happened with comics, or is that what's happening with comics? I think people seem to think so. I don't think there's enough data to know for sure. But in my mind, when I look at where comics are at, comics has curated an audience over decades. Typically collectors, people who like long form storytelling, people who like the comic genre. By the way, when I say comics here, just to be specific, I'm talking about Western US comics, the Marvel and DCs, and somewhat indies of the world. That's the audience they got. That's the audience they slowly grew. And it took a long time to get that audience, but that's the audience they have. There's a desire to get a new audience, and only a fool wouldn't try and do that. Eventually, your audience is going to age out. You do need, if you're going to grow and expand, you need to appeal to new people. But the attempts that the comic companies are making to appeal to new people seem to be isolating the existing audience, or at least some portion of them. Now, it's hard to tell how many, and it's hard to tell, exactly the numbers here. But if you look at comics today in the 2020, era, this decade, they certainly look and are different from how they were 30 years ago. Is this a natural evolution or is this a change? By the way, you may be thinking, oh, he's talking about content and the quality of the storytelling, but there's a lot of other things. It's not just that. A lot more series are based on limited series. The relaunches happen more frequently. The events happen more frequently. This is a definite change for the U.S. comic industry. They're behaving differently. People get very caught up in the social aspects of it, and they're changing this character, they're gender bending this character, etc. And those things are happening too, but there's some actual, non-subjective just facts that you can point to make this entire discussion a little bit easier, like the relaunches, like the events. No matter how much you want to argue anything, there were not this volume of standalone events, tie-ins, relaunches, if you go back in time 30 years ago. Just quantifiably, mathematically, factually, there were not. It's different. So the comic industry is trying to do something different. It's clearly changed itself, whether purposefully or by accident, it's changing. And in theory, it changing means it should be appealing to a new audience. But is it? I had somebody write in, and I'm not going to read the letter, but it's too hard to parse. But basically in the letter it said, hey, a lot of people are arguing against, trans inclusion and LGBTQ themes and slice of life stories and in food and things like that in comics. But what if that's the audience it's for? And for a while, I'm like, I couldn't really get the question. And then it kind of clicked. It dawned on me. It's all right. So if this is the content it's for, has the hobby changed? Has the industry shifted? And my answer to that is no, it hasn't. It may be trying to, but it hasn't yet. Today, the industry is still propped up by collectors, by some of these longtime comic readers. Now, the makers of the current comics may want to see those people disappear and be replaced with the audience they want. And whether they want that audience for social reasons, they believe that audience is going to live longer and therefore has more money to spend, whether it's a cold, calculated business decision, or it's just, this is what we want because we were put in charge and no one really paid attention and now we're getting what we want, or somewhere in between, or both. Regardless, that audience hasn't appeared yet. The comics that are written for, quote unquote, the new audience that feature a lot of non-traditional, meaning new, themes, they don't sell terribly well. The numbers are poor. Occasionally, you'll get one that pops a number. Tom Taylor talks about how his Superboy made a lot of money, but it made a lot of money for the big announcement, and it's far more likely that that audience came from speculators wanting to have the first issue where Superman's son came out, and not because they were terribly in love with the storyline. Now, we don't know for sure. There's no way to actually, sit down and get an accurate pulse on it. But based on how the sales went, that issue popped and then immediately fell down. The trades popped and then evaporated quickly, that suggests more of a speculator market in the same way that Elektra getting a new costume or any number of stunts change things. A beloved character dies, but everybody knows that character is going to be brought back to life a couple months later. Those issues tend to sell well. They pop a number because they are, to some extent, stunts. And stunts are bought by collectors, by speculators. And collectors and speculators, at least the historical kind, are clearly not the audience that this group wants. Or they're making an assumption that whatever is inside the pages, it doesn't matter. It could be in another language, it could be scribbles. As long as the right elements of a collector-based product show up in the comic, that audience will buy it. Now, people could be making that bet. It would be an incredibly stupid bet, but they could be. Or maybe they're just hoping that that audience will be slow to unhook. Maybe the people are like me. They're still collecting the X-Men, even though they don't like the current storyline, because they want to complete their run. And they know one fact. Every comic run has had a stinker of a series. Every comic run has had part of that run be lousy. And they know that collectors will sit through it. They have the history, they have the data, they know people will just keep buying. And the collectors keep buying because they know this stinker of a line doesn't last too long. Eventually, things shift. We get a good run out of it. Collectors are kind of interesting, and take this from somebody who sold comics over 3 decades. They all kind of seem to accept the fact that the thing they're putting their money down for eventually starts to suck. And when it sucks, the right answer is wait it out, because you don't want to break your run, or there may be some element through all the suckage that gets picked up by a better run later, and you don't want to miss out. So you keep watching, whether it's TV, or you keep buying if it's comics, because you know this too will pass. But what if it's not going to pass? So think about the motivations here. If people making the comics are sitting down at a table saying, look, everybody, we've got to get to this new audience. We've got to get the new people in the hobby. Then if that's true, and that's their motivation, they're going to keep trying and trying and trying until they get there or go broke. No, this isn't one of those go woke, go broke videos, but to some extent, it's at least, that's how business is. You try your strategy. If you really believe in it, you keep at it, and you're willing to take it to the ground if necessary. I'm not sure that the comic publishers have that kind of stamina or determination. I think they'd like to shift comics to this. I think when you look at Disney and their programming, they believe the answer is in kind of lighter, more fluffy programming that is homogenous in terms of the demographic it appeals to, so it in theory casts the widest net. And if you're a theme park, that makes sense. You got lots of people coming in. Your goal is sell tickets. Your goal is sell tickets to everybody, and the worst thing you could do is start to irritate any one group, which in fairness Disney has kind of started to do. But ultimately your goal is to be as neutral as possible. You just want people in your theme park buying crap. On TV it also kind of works because you're chasing advertising dollars. Now something like Disney Plus is a subscription service, but you're still chasing sponsors, you're still chasing producers. So if that's where a lot of your money is coming from, you still may have to do this. But comics, you got to find that audience. You got to find that new group who's going to consume your hobby. So, I picked up a book from Image, and I don't remember the title of it, and I should have. But basically, this book is about, the premise is that a bunch of grandmas, old ladies, have been sent to an island to fight to the death. And also make friends and bake things. That's what the synopsis says. It's not a good comic. I mean, points for doing something kind of original, but it didn't land. In the back of the comic, much like Bitch Planet and other comics that are kind of a similar vein, they're publishing essays and poems and things from a variety of writers, and one of them was a collection of poems from trans poets. Now, I skimmed this comic book. I didn't look quickly through it, but I didn't see kind of a trans character, but maybe there was one, or I just missed it. It's quite possible. The character is about grandmas killing each other with knives, which sounds like it should be pretty entertaining. It wasn't, but I saw that there, and I thought, who's this for? And I got to thinking, is the audience buying a grandma killing comic book also into trans poetry? I have a hard time believing they are. Maybe. Again, I feel a little bit, in out of my element here because I haven't studied kind of this comic and the series and all I haven't gone deep into it. So maybe the writer is trans, or maybe, okay, that makes sense then. I haven't made the connection yet, but I saw that and I'm like, you know, when you get your MBA, one of the things they tell you is, cross marketing. You got to be careful with that. You want to make sure that every element feels natural to the consumer. And if you have parts that just, if you're trying to appeal to one consumer and you do something radically different in another area, like, for example, if you were putting on a concert and, you had Rob Zombie and Jewel was the opening act, that would be a bad pairing of performers. That would not make a lot of sense. Why would you do that? It's kind of the problem with like Kmart trying to class itself up, selling Rolex watches. People don't want to go to Kmart for Rolex watches. They're not going to do that. So there's a little bit of an element of like, what are we doing? But in the context of all this, if comics are trying to appeal to a different audience, if they're trying to widen that umbrella, it kind of makes sense that they're flailing around to some extent, trying to figure out, what's going to land with who. But there's still the one hard constant fact that people have to get their head around, and that is you have 40, 50 years of a pretty established type of consumer that's been buying your product. If you want to do something different, you can, but you're about to leap over a chasm. It's unclear if you're going to make it. You're basically, at some point, are going to have to either embrace your current audience or fully detach from it. But you cannot have your cake and eat it too. At some point, you're going to have to make a choice. I think comics wants to make the choice of the new audience, but continuously the money's not there. And if your attempt at getting the new audience is knife killing grandmas and trans poetry, I don't. It's going to be hard to get. What audience are you going for exactly? In the Venn diagram of consumers that would buy comics, that know about image, that like knife killing grannies and trans poetry, I mean, that overlap. Again, more power to you, man. You have your dream, chase it. But I don't know. I don't see how that one comes together. But it's an interesting state, and I think a lot of the people who are frustrated with their hobby changing, but the thing they always do changing, certainly some of them act out, and it's absolutely no doubt about it. But you are being disingenuous if you can't at least pretend to understand the anger and the frustration. If you had something that you collected for a long time, put money into, loved, bought, etc., and then it suddenly said, "All right, we would like you to keep buying. We need your money, but we're going to go ahead and appeal to somebody completely different. So I hope you'll change your tastes and interests and come along for this ride. But if not, please at least keep giving us your cash. We kind of think you will because you're a collector and you're not going to want to break up your run." I mean, that's kind of a lot to ask. It's very easy for a creator who's a freelancer who has no long-term interest in the company to say, "Hey, just don't get lost. We don't need you. I don't want your money." I mean, sure, but the company they work for does. So here's the state we're in. I think we're and in many ways, I think people are kind of almost holding their breath. Where's it going to go? Is it A or B? Are we going to shift over and fully embrace this new type of storytelling and this new type of comic, and the audience is going to be there for it, or are we going to retreat back? the collectors are playing a game of chicken right now. They're going, it's a bad run right now, but we've seen bad runs before. This one's going on for a little longer than usual, but it's going to turn around. Who wins? And for what it's worth, as I wrap this whole thing up, I'll just throw out my little suggestion, my humble suggestion. You've heard it before. In a world where you're putting out close to 500 comics a month between all the different companies, is there not room for everyone? Like, even within Marvel, is there seriously not room for? I mean, look, if you're Marvel putting out almost 80 comics a month, 40 comics, 50% of your comics appealing to your collector audience, utilizing creators and storylines and techniques, not relaunching all the time, not going overboard with events. 40 comics appealing to that audience and 40 comics appealing to the new audience. You can't do that. That seems like a pretty fair compromise. I mean, I as a business person, I kind of cringe a little bit because I don't think you found the new audience. So I certainly wouldn't commit half of my line to a market that doesn't exist yet. But hell, you've got deep pockets. You're owned by Disney. Go for it. Whatever. A lot of collectors and long-term comic readers would be overjoyed to have 40 comics a month that are kind of more historical. It would be Christmas. I said earlier, you can't have your cake and eat it too. In a way, you kind of can. You can do both. Why wouldn't you? Anyway, thanks for hearing me out.